Wednesdays recently, after 11 o'clock, we've had the opportunity to have a listen to what we may be able to do individually to ensure, if you like, a more comfortable retirement. And last week we talked about the appropriate age to start planning for retirement, and a lot of people do leave it too late. We know all that. So today we're going to step down, through various other matters too, when it comes to fundamentally looking after our wealth much more carefully and capably. Now we turn to Fowler's in our city centre. Today we've got financial advisor at Fowler's Group, Paul Fowler, on the line. Hello, Paul.
Good morning, Macca. How are you going this morning,
Paul.
mate?
Just the last few weeks, what's been the main focus of the point that Fowler's are making?
Oh, look, mate, it's all around retirement benefits over the last few weeks and things for people to look out for and consider. We've had quite a number of people come across our desk wanting to set up, for example, self-managed super funds. It's something that's been sort of high priority of recent times, or at least considering it. So we've had quite a number of conversations to people around that and as to why they want to do it and things to consider to actually do that, because it's not necessarily straightforward, Macca. But yeah, I'd be happy to run through a few, I guess, areas for people to consider if that's what they're looking at doing.
Definitely. What's the first point you'd like to make?
Well, I think most people want to do it essentially is because where we see it the most when markets haven't been too favourable and people look at their superannuation funds, for example, and they're not doing too well, so you go, you know what, I can do this better myself, so we'll set up a self-managed super fund. Or the major reason is to invest in direct property, which is, I guess, their real benefit over to a standard retail type fund. But a number of things we look at, people come in and they've actually set up self-managed super funds, and the money that they've rolled into it is still sitting in cash, with the hope to maybe find a property to invest in. So you have this great investment where it's actually been sitting in cash for quite a long time, which basically has an adverse effect on your retirement wealth.
When you talk about investing in property like that, what comes to mind? Generally speaking, what does that particular person, what sort of property does he or she look for to invest in?
Yeah, look, the most common, Macca, and I'd say the most common reason self-managed super funds are set up around Australia are generally business owners that buy the property that they end up working out of, and they lease back to themselves. It's probably the most common, and generally is a viable option going forward. But there's a lot of other reasons. People just want to invest in the direct residential property market as well, and that's another huge area that people get into. And sometimes that may or may not be the right option for them. When you're looking at costs, whether you've got to borrow money to do that, there's a whole raft of issues to consider. And notwithstanding, you're then taking on the responsibility of legislation and sticking to the rules as well, which is hard enough.
You list here also inaction. You've also got ignoring costs. Step us through those points.
From a self-managed super fund point of view, look, there's obviously cost to actually get the fund set up. So you actually have to pay a solicitor or someone that prepares them to set up the fund itself. You need a trustee to be set up. There's actual accountancy costs that come along with having your own self-managed super fund. You've got to set up trustees, so whether there's corporate trustees. So there's all these initial costs, and depending how much you have to invest and what you want to do, may be worthwhile doing. But then the other thing that quite often gets, I guess, not forgotten but not thought about is the ongoing costs. As I mentioned, you do have the accounting and auditing, but your investment costs, that if you're buying a property, there's cost in acquiring it, stamp duty, which is probably the worst tax we have in Australia, I think. But there's those costs that you have to think about. There's management costs, legal fees. So you just have to take all these into account when considering whether it's the right investment. I'm not saying it's not, but it's important to understand what those costs are when you're comparing it to other options that may be available.
It's funny, I've talked to some people who have done this, and they sort of look upon it as a hobby, and this is going to be fun, it'll be an interest for me, but they completely ignored the commitment in time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, as you said, you're taking it on board yourself, and it's probably gives you something to do for the first 12 months, 2 years, but then it can become a little bit tedious, John. But you know, if you've got a property, the decision is you're going to manage that yourself or not. If you decide to invest in stocks, for example, are you going to be do the research on what to buy or not to buy, which is possible, or do you farm that out to a specialist to do, which you can do as well. But then there's that added cost. You know, you get a financial advisor on board or a property manager on board, then there's extra costs. So it all comes back to, you know, yes, you can do that yourself, but do you really want to do that, or would you rather do stuff that you enjoy doing?
Risks, understanding the risks. Talk to us about legal responsibility.
Oh, look, at the end of the day, once you take on board a self-managed super fund, you're responsible to stick to the rules. There's a thing called the trust deed, which is basically the rule book of what you can and can't do, and this is highly regulated throughout Australia. So you can employ people to read those documents and give advice, but at the end of the day, you are the trustee, and it's your head on the chopping block if things aren't done correctly. So, yeah, I don't want it to sound ugly, because there's certainly a place for them, Macca. There certainly is, but it's just, I think sometimes people just need to consider all the options before doing it.
Exactly. Yep. Now, let's talk about something else that would be necessary too. For example, the returns, benchmarking returns.
Yeah. You've got, so for example, if you've got a standard retail fund, that's invested in, I don't know, an equity portfolio, whoever it is, Australian Super, Sun Super, doesn't matter who it is, they will have an investment philosophy or investment strategy, and they have a benchmark that they compare their returns to. So if they have an Australian share fund, they'll compare it to the ASX 200, for example. And then on an ongoing basis, what you don't want to see is that the fund you have is underperforming the benchmark consistently. When you've got a self-managed super fund, sometimes that can be a bit hard, because generally you're buying a property, and it's just hard to find the resources to compare that to. We've got a great saying in the office when we talk about returns is compared to what. So, and why we use that is that quite often you might hear people say, yeah, I've got this great return, for example, 10% on an investment, which is a great return. But we ask compared to what? Because it's not that great if somewhere else you're getting 15%, or it's great if everyone else is getting 5%, but, what have you got that to compare to? It might sound great, but if you're getting 10 and everyone else is getting 15, maybe not so great. Compared to what, Macca? Compared to what?
Oh, this is seriously. And then you've got compliance worries and management of the documents. Yeah.
You've got all that. You've got to keep your records all up to date, obviously. But at the end of the day, the main thing when you have your self-managed super fund is that there's a test called the sole purpose test that says anything you do within that fund, you have to do for the sole purpose of retirement purposes. You can't, for example, you can't go and buy a beach house and rent it out for 80% of the year and then use it for yourself during the school holidays. It's not allowed. So everything has to be done for retirement purposes. And that's just something that you always have to consider, when you make any investments within the self-managed super fund. But I just want to stress that they are a great tool, but they're just not the right tool for everyone. But for the right circumstances, they're a great tool.
For those who have or believe they've actually made a mistake in going down that road, is it easy to back out?
Yeah, you can close the funds down, and there's not a problem with that. There's just some financial requirements that you'll have to get done through accounts to wind it up, but it's not a major issue to wind the fund down. But anyone that has them, my first port of call would just be talking to someone to make sure that it's the right thing for them, because as I said, they are a great tool, but the way that superannuation has transformed and the flexibility these days, there's a lot of products available now that can give you similar sort of benefits as a self-managed super fund, rather than and not having to have the responsibility yourself.
Now, finally, for those people who find themselves overwhelmed by the self-managed superannuation funds, can they just come into you and hand everything over and you sort out the matter for them?
Look, we'd be more than happy to have an initial conversation with people about it and see if it's the right thing for them or not. And it may be just some minor adjustments that they need to do, and there may be no need to close down. I wouldn't expect everyone running out now and closing down their self-managed super funds, because it still might be the right thing. Or we just wanted to talk about a couple of the, I guess, common issues that we see when people come in, just to be aware of that people aren't aware of. That's all.
Exactly. Good on you, Paulo. Now, how do people find you?
Mate, we can find us. We're on Lake Street, right near the taxi rank or the main bus terminal. Or we go to our Facebook. Our webpage, fowlersgroup.com.au.
Good on you, Paul. Thank you, Paul Fowler, financial advisor at Fowlers Group, 25 past.